Cassandra is a Melbourne-based coach whose purpose is to contribute to the creation of workplaces where people and performance can truly thrive. Cassandra has joined a 2-decade corporate career, having held a range of senior executive roles in Australia and overseas, including being the Global Director of Employee Wellbeing at Bupa, where she was responsible for the activation of Bupa's purpose: longer, healthier, happier lives for their 86,000 employees around the globe. Today, in addition to running her own coaching and consulting business, Cassandra works for Thrive Global, an organisation founded and led by Arianna Huffington to end the global burnout epidemic. She has 2 young sons who I know are at home with her at the moment, and is also working on her first book, which will be available next year. Thanks, Cassandra, and I'll hand over to you.
Thanks so much, Martine. Yes, I have 2 young boys being homeschooled downstairs by my husband, so hopefully they're not going to interrupt me this morning. So when I thought about this opportunity today to talk a bit about how might we stay well during this incredibly challenging time, I really had to think carefully about what are the most important things that I can share today. As Martine said, I'm currently working for Thrive Global, and normally I would run a full day workshop on some of the topics we're going to cover today in just maybe 20 minutes. So I've really tried to distill the essence down to what I think is most essential for us to anchor to during these really challenging times. So I'm going to attempt to keep my sharing part of the session to about 15 or 20 minutes, so there's time at the end for people to ask questions if you have any. So really, when I think about the challenges that we're all facing, the thing that I keep coming back to is that we are in this incredible opportunity for radical personal growth. And I know that perhaps it might not feel like radical personal growth, it might feel like radical challenge, but I believe that the foundation of our capacity to thrive and to grow through the challenges we're facing is really hinges on this reframe. How might we see the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months as this period of radical personal growth? And there's a quote that I love that I thought I'd start by sharing that kind of talks to this. And the quote comes from Cynthia Ocelli. For the seed to achieve its greatest expression, it must come completely undone. The shell cracks, its insides come out, and everything changes. For someone who does not understand growth, it would look like complete destruction. And I love that quote because I think that many of us might feel at the moment like our life as we know it, the routines as we know it, have come to a complete halt, a complete sense of destruction of our day-to-day existence. But by reframing this as the perfect conditions for radical personal growth, I think is an incredibly liberating and uplifting reframe. So there's 3 things I want to talk about this morning. First, the idea of focusing on what we can control. The second is about getting really clear on our non-negotiables, and actually Bea talked a little bit about our daily routine and making sure that we've got the right things in place there. So I'll build on what Bea shared so beautifully just a short while ago. And then the third area is sleep, because we know that sleep is the foundation of our well-being. We know that sleep is the foundation of our capacity to respond rather than react to the challenges we're experiencing. So I do want to touch on sleep. Okay, so let's start with the first one, which is focusing on what we can control. So it's absolutely normal at the moment to be feeling helpless, to be feeling really disorientated, and almost this surreal feeling like, is this really happening? There's so much of our day-to-day routine that perhaps has been impacted by the measures we're having to take to stay safe and to minimize the impact that the coronavirus is having. But it is possible for us to become the eye of the storm in the sense that we can control a lot of things about what's happening to us. And what I want to focus on this morning is our capacity to control our thoughts and the resulting actions and behaviors we are exhibiting as a result of the thoughts that we're having. So this idea of being able to control our thoughts, the capacity we have as humans to be in the driver's seat of our thinking, this is not a new idea. The Stoics have been talking about this for a long, long time. This is one of those ancient truths, the ancient wisdoms. And like all ancient wisdoms or fundamental truths, they might be very simple, but that doesn't mean they're easy. So how might we use this opportunity to cultivate this really, I would say, essential life skill of knowing that we are in charge of our thoughts. We are in charge of the channel that was playing in our mind. We are in charge of the stories that we tell ourselves about what's happening, because we know that suffering as humans is not caused by what happens to us. Suffering is caused by the stories we tell ourselves about what is happening to us. So my invitation is to use this time as an opportunity to start to notice your thoughts, to embed a daily practice of meditation or reflection, to start to become a witness to your thinking, and even to become a witness to the beliefs that you hold, because often our beliefs are, I often use an image of an iceberg when I talk about beliefs, and I'll share this in a pack that I've put together. So if you think about our actions being above the waterline and our beliefs being the things underneath the waterline, the bit of the iceberg that's submerged and often not in our conscious awareness, it's our beliefs that often drive us to behave a certain way. So even using this time to start to illuminate and understand, what beliefs do we hold? They might be beliefs around our own, how busy and important we are. They might be beliefs around the delusion that we are the center of the universe and that our needs are more important than other people's needs. It might be the belief that we're actually not worthy of self-care. So by illuminating these beliefs, we can really have a dramatic shift in how we see the world, how we see ourselves, and therefore the actions and behaviors we're taking to stay well. So I do invite you firstly to start to play around with a daily reflective or meditation practice, so you can start to practice being in the driver's seat of your thinking when you can start to disassociate, which as I said, is not easy if it's not something you've practiced before. As humans, for example, when it comes to physical pain, we're quite good at disassociating. So we might say, I have a headache. But when it comes to emotional pain, it's very easy to be consumed by that. For example, you might say, I am overwhelmed, as opposed to saying, I'm noticing I'm having the feeling of being overwhelmed, and to know that feeling or thought is something that can come and go, and that's something that you can choose to respond to rather than react to. Our thoughts, our emotions are not instructions. So just like anything, it takes practice. If I just explained to you that playing the guitar was the key to thriving through times of challenge, you wouldn't expect to pick up a guitar today and start banging out a few tunes. You would know instinctively that you need to practice. And it's the same with this meditation, mindfulness, reflective practice. There's hundreds of apps. There's thousands of free online meditations. Buddhify or Insights Timer are the two I recommend. And even if you start with 3 or 5 minutes a day, when you're practicing getting behind the waterfall of your thoughts, getting in the stillness behind the constant deluge of thoughts and emotions, and to start to observe rather than be caught up in the whitewash, then I really encourage you to do that. I think that now is the perfect time and a really essential time to start embedding a daily reflective practice. And we know that our outer power comes from our inner strength and our inner clarity, which comes from a practice in mindfulness. And there's more and more coaches and people that I work with in my circles who are taking clients on with a kind of condition that if you want to work with me as a coach, I expect you to have a daily mindfulness or reflective practice. And there's people who I think are now becoming more and more clear on how essential this is for our personal transformation and growth. So the second thing I wanted to talk about is this idea of non-negotiables. So, as Martine said, I was really fortunate to spend some time as the Global Director of Employee Wellbeing at Bupa. And I remember when I got appointed in that role, I was thinking, oh my God, what the hell do I do? We've got 86,000 people around the world. Where do I start? And what we discovered at Bupa was this idea of non-negotiables. And this concept, a simple concept yet again, really became the backbone of our global employee wellbeing strategy and program, and it was highly effective. And the reason I think this idea of non-negotiables is highly effective is it's inherently a very personal thing. It's not someone else saying you need to do this or you need to do that. Non-negotiables are really things that are identified for us as individuals. They're things that we know we need to do on a regular, daily, weekly basis in order to stay well. So the first step in this process is really to start becoming clear on what are your non-negotiables. We each know in our heart of hearts what we should be doing on a daily basis to stay well. It doesn't mean we always do it, but if we again take some time to reflect and to think about what we know we need to feel nourished, to feel strong, physically, emotionally, and mentally strong. I'm sure we could all come up with a list. So for me, some of my non-negotiables include a morning meditation, daily exercise, and at the moment, of course, I'm having to compromise what that exercise looks like, but daily movement, time with my families. I know that I need 7 hours of sleep, and I'll talk about sleep a little bit later, but one of my non-negotiables is getting to bed at the right time so that I know I'm getting my 7 hours sleep and getting up early in the morning to do my morning routine, which means I need to sacrifice things like Netflix and hours of news and other things, but I make those sacrifices because I know I need that sleep. The other thing that I know for me is alcohol. I know that if I drink alcohol in the evenings, I'm more likely to get into catastrophic thinking. I'm more likely to feel down, and I'm less likely to sleep well, and I'm less likely to get up the next morning and start my day off right with some exercise and meditation. So avoiding alcohol for me is a really important part of my non-negotiables as well. So the first step is to get clear on what do you need to thrive, write it down, and then think about how do you honor these things. Again, drawing on a reflective or mindfulness practice, thinking about what are some of the things that get in the way of you honoring your non-negotiables. And often it is our beliefs, our deep beliefs that often are the things that stop us doing what we know we should be doing in order to stay well. And a belief that often comes up in this area when I coach people is the belief that I'm not worthy, that I'm not worthy of self-care, that I need to play this role as victim, as martyr, as hero. You know, I need to look after everyone else, but I myself am not worthy of the sort of self-care that I know I need to stay well. And so uncovering or illuminating that belief is just gold. When we start to notice that deep down we don't feel a sense of worthiness to take care of ourselves, and we can start to work with that belief, we can start to reprogram that belief, and we can start to give ourselves permission to put our own oxygen mask on first, which, you know, we all hear that every time we fly, and there's a good reason that we're told to do that. We need to put our own oxygen mask on first. We need to take care of ourselves so we have the capacity to take care of others. So I do encourage you to think about what are your non-negotiables, and to think about how are you honoring those things and what's getting in the way of you honoring your non-negotiables. And it does take courage to face into these beliefs about yourself and the extent to which you're worthy of the time of self-care. Whether you identify with being the hero that always needs to be the tough one who says, you know, lunch is for wimps and I'll sleep when I'm dead, and all these really unhelpful constructs that we sometimes hear, and coming back to this place of just groundedness and worthiness to take care of yourself. I think that's what I'll say on non-negotiables. I think the other thing I'll just touch on that's going to help with both of these practices is a beautiful mindfulness technique called RAIN. And RAIN comes from the book called Radical Compassion, and I'll put a link to that in my notes. RAIN stands for Recognize, Allow, Investigate, and Nurture. It's a really simple tool that I use regularly, many times every day at the moment, to check in, to recognize the feelings, the emotions that are at play for me, to allow those emotions, to make space for those emotions. So if I'm feeling overwhelmed, the visual I often use is if I had a little cup of overwhelm that was like a cup of red dye, if I poured that cup of overwhelm into the kitchen sink versus that cup of overwhelm into the ocean, what would be the difference in terms of my capacity to make space? And so my mantra is to make space, to kind of create this sense of openness, expansiveness, to hold the overwhelm and to not be consumed by it, and not to use it as directions for how to behave or how to react. When we allow and make space, then we're able to investigate. We can ask ourselves, what does the overwhelmed part of myself believe in this moment? What would I be if I didn't hold that belief? What would I be without this belief? And then we can nurture, we can ask ourselves, what do I need most right now? And to answer that question from a deeper wisdom rather than a fight or flight response. So that's a little tool that I'll link to that book in the pack. I think the other thing that I'm thinking a lot about is the book Thinking Fast and Slow, and many of you maybe have read that book, Thinking Fast and Slow. It's not a book I always recommend because I find it quite a dense book and quite a difficult book to read. But if you think about this idea, we've got fast thinking and we've got slow thinking. We'd like to think that we're mainly accessing our slow thinking, our wiser, more discerning thinking, but actually most of us live most of the time in our fast thinking, or what the book would refer to as systems one thinking, fast thinking. And we know that our fast thinking, our reactive thinking, is more likely to generate fake news and to believe the fake news. We're more likely to live in this kind of echo chamber of our own fake news feed, our own stories that we're telling ourselves about how catastrophic this is and how it's all doom and gloom. We're far more to be caught in those loops when we're tired and when we're depleted. When we're feeling strong and nourished and we're getting good sleep, we're more able to access our slow thinking, our systems two thinking, which is far more wise and far more discerning. So that's another book just to maybe go back to and to think about how might you maximize your chances of accessing your slow systems two thinking, that's going to be a far more truthful and wise and discerning guide for us in these challenging times. So the final thing I'll talk about is sleep. And sleep is a tricky topic, right? Because at the moment, it's so tempting to stay up late, to watch the news, to kind of fool ourselves into thinking that we need to be on top of everything. We need to be across everything that's happening across the media. We've got to be completely on top of our work. And it's far easier to be caught in catastrophic thinking and thoughts that are anxiety creating thoughts, which of course means it's harder to sleep. We may also be drinking more coffee and more caffeine during the day. We know caffeine for most of us has a big impact on our sleep. And we may be more likely to have a couple of glasses of wine or other alcoholic beverages in the evening, right? We're trying to numb some of these strong emotions that we're feeling. And we know that alcohol for many of us has an impact on our ability to experience deep, nourishing sleep. So just a couple of basic sleep hygiene principles that we all need 7 hours of sleep as a minimum as adults. So we all should be aiming at this time for 7 hours sleep. So working back from when you want to get up in the morning to do whatever morning ritual you want to do, or to get some work done before the kids wake up. For me, I get up every morning at 5:30 to do my morning ritual. I'll work back 7 hours and make sure I am asleep at that time. So that's the first point. I think the second point is maximize your chance of falling asleep easily at that time. So that would mean getting your devices out of your bedroom. You know, Arianna Huffington talks a lot about sleep in the work we do for Thrive Global. And Thrive was actually established when Arianna collapsed from pure exhaustion after working crazy hours at the Huffington Post. So her lack of sleep and exhaustion led to the creation of Thrive Global. And when Ariana speaks about sleep, the number one tip is always get your devices out of your bedrooms. Buy an alarm clock. That's the most important tip. Buy an alarm clock, get your devices out of your bedroom. And if you can't bring yourself to imagine that possibility, then turn your devices off 30 minutes before you want to fall asleep. Read a hard copy book. Do a breathing meditation. Just relax. But don't be on your devices 30 minutes before bed. I think the other thing is to be discerning about what news sources you're tuning into at the moment. You know, be really discerning about the sort of content you are consuming at the moment. Just like we need to be really discerning about the sort of food and other substances we put in our body to nourish ourselves, we also need to be really discerning about the sorts of content we are consuming. So stick to the government websites, stick to news sources that are not going to be too sensationalist in their reporting. You know, I stick to ABC and the government websites for my updates to make sure I'm staying safe and following the latest advice without getting caught up in all the catastrophic sensationalist thinking that is also out there. I'm just checking my notes to make sure I don't forget anything else on sleep. So mindfulness. So the other thing that just to point out here is that our mindfulness practice is really the most important tool we can employ for sleep, because we know it's natural to wake up between sleep cycles, and often, you know, I'll wake up at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning, as most of you, I'm sure, have these moments of wakefulness during the night, and that's where the mindfulness practice kicks in. Our capacity to choose the channel on our thinking when we wake up in the night is really important. So when I wake up at 2 or 3 a.m., I've kind of got two channels in my brain I can choose to watch. I can watch the anxious, catastrophic thinking channel about all the anxiety about all the things I need to do tomorrow and how I'm going to be so tired and how it's going to be so difficult and all the things that could go wrong financially and from a health perspective for my family, then the catastrophic news channel. Or I can watch the other channel, which is the channel where I tell myself that I am warm, I am safe, I'm in a warm, dry bed, and spare a thought for the millions of people across the world who don't have that. And I can just focus on my breathing and just kind of soothe myself back to sleep and not allow my thinking to get caught on that other channel. So our capacity to choose the story in our head, to choose the channel we're watching, so to speak, is effectively a mindfulness practice. And every time we catch ourselves having a thought that's not helpful and we switch our thoughts to the other channel, it's like a bicep curl for your brain. It's like a bicep curl for your mindfulness practice. So mindfulness is not about switching your brain off. It's about being discerning about what you're thinking about and what is your focus in that moment. Are you going to focus on your breath? Are you going to focus on cultivating a felt sense of gratitude for having a warm bed to sleep in? Or are you going to focus on something else? So I think one of the secret weapons to being able to sleep well and be able to soothe yourself back to sleep during moments of wakefulness, particularly at the moment, is a mindfulness practice and building that muscle of having the choice of what you're thinking about in those wee hours of the morning. So I'm conscious of time. I've spoken for just over 20 minutes. We've got 8 minutes left. I'll stop talking now to see if anyone has something specific they'd like to ask now.
We haven't got anything specific in there, but what I do want to call out is that people have been really generous in sharing some of their practices with the apps that they use, what they're doing for mindfulness. There's some articles that have been shared in the chat.
Fantastic. Well, maybe we can gather all those up and add them to the stuff we send out, Martine. That would be wonderful.
Absolutely. And we've also had a request to share a couple of your book recommendations too. So.
Oh, yes. Okay. So I'll put that in the pack. What was that, Thea?
They want your entire book list.
So I'll say so my website is cassandragoodman.com. That will be in the pack. In there, I have written an article on my entire recommended book list. It's pretty long because I am in love with books, but I have in the pack distilled it down to a list of the most critical books I think we should all be reading at the moment. And they are Emotional Agility, Pioneering the Possible, Who Do We Choose to Be, and Radical Compassion. They're the 4 books I would recommend that everyone should be reading right now to ground themselves in some of the things I've spoken about. That's all in the pack. You'll also see on my website, there's about, I think maybe 8 or 10 videos that I've filmed that dive in to some of the topics I've covered today and share a little bit more detail. And like many of people in the coaching profession at the moment, you know, I am also offering significant discounts on one-on-one coaching if you feel like you just like one session to dive in more deeply, particularly what I talked about, that area of limiting beliefs, because the more work I do with Thrive and the more work I do as a coach, I really see this foundation of strong, healthy beliefs as being so essential. And when we do the Thrive Global workshops, we really spend the first 2 or 3 hours talking about our beliefs, because we know that I can tell you to sleep, to exercise, to avoid alcohol, to stop smoking, to move your body and to meditate. But if you have got a belief that you are not worthy, then none of that stuff is going to work. And so when we try to take steps for self-care, but building it on a foundation of a belief such as I am not worthy, I am not valuable, I am not safe, then it's kind of like building on quicksand. So the more work I do in this space, the more I'm absolutely convinced that building this rock solid foundation for our capacity to thrive, our capacity to take care of ourselves, the rock solid foundation are strong beliefs that we are worthy, we are valuable, and being really clear on who will we choose to be as worthy, valuable humans who all have the right to thrive. So that work takes courage. That is a work of personal transformation. And I think part of the challenge we've got at the moment, having spent 20 years of business, we love to talk about organizational transformation, but there's not many leaders who are talking about personal transformation. And it is my deep belief that until more leaders have the courage to look within themselves, to illuminate some of their beliefs and habits of thinking, until more leaders and more humans are willing to find the courage to embark in this radical personal growth, the radical personal transformation, then there's no way we're able to transform our organizations, and there's no way we're able to transform the way as a civilization we're working with nature and working in a way that's sustainably. So that's something that's very dear to my heart.
Wise words. Awesome.
Thank you, Cassandra. We are nearly at the end of our session here, so if there's any final comments, we do see that on the line we've had Eduardo's kids join in on the fun.
That's great.
Can you see them? Can you say hello?
Hello.
I just want to thank you personally, Cassandra, for taking the time. These 30 minutes have been beautiful. Taking this time to do this for us. I know we're touching a lot of people. I think we've got more than 200 people registered. We send the email. I know people are sharing it. I know people are watching it. So sending this message about radical personal growth in this time and all the positive messages that you've given us, I'm sure it's going to touch a lot of people. So I also use the time when you said that people need to go to bed at the right time, and I put my headphones into my kids. So now they know they need to go to bed at the right time every night. So I thank you as well for that.
Great, yeah. And there's so many beautiful guided meditations for kids at the moment. You know, my youngest son has trouble sleeping, and so I'll often leave him in the evenings with a guided meditation that helps soothe him to sleep. So meditation is for kids as well. So that's wonderful.
That's right. That's right. Thank you again. I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna put myself on mute, and I'm gonna leave Martin to close it.
Great, thanks. Thank you again, Cassandra. Tomorrow we have our 4th webinar, which will be joined by Richard Harmer and Joe Lawrence from our team, and they're sharing about how we stay connected with each other as a team. And there's some really great tips and thoughts in there. So please come along tomorrow morning, share with your colleagues or friends. Things have changed again over the weekend, so I think there'll be more and more people working from home, and the more people we can reach and share what we know and our learnings, hopefully that will help others. So see you all tomorrow morning.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.